This is how I converted this 12 volt Jeep purchased from Amazon into a 24 volt Jeep running on Milwaukee M18 batteries. And this is really not your typical video. I'm not going to show you how to do it and how to hook everything up. I'm going to show you everything that went wrong watching the YouTube videos that I watched and how I fixed it to get something that actually worked properly. So if you've been struggling to get yours to work, here are a lot of tips and tricks that I learned along the way. Hopefully you don't have to buy everything that I ended up buying to get yours to work. You can just buy the parts you need and it'll work a lot easier than mine did. So here was my setup initially. I first watched the Dorsum tool reviews video on YouTube, and it was very helpful. He told me, or he shows in the video, how to take the M18 battery, use a step down buck converter to then plug it into the Jeep. This is representing the Jeep. This is actually the controller on the Jeep, which I'll get to in a second. So I bought this also with the fan and the harness, right? Plugged the harness into here and that lit up and seemed to work. And then I did plug in, his had a plug directly for the fan. Mine did not, but I just hooked that up and the fan worked. And anyway, it was great. So then I plugged this into the Jeep. I played around with it for a second, seemed to work, but I didn't actually put it on the ground or put my child in it before his birthday. So his birthday rolls around and he opens it up and he tries to use this Jeep, and not nearly enough power was going to the motor to make it run at all. It was stuttering terribly and I couldn't get it to work. So in kind of my desperation just to have him enjoy his birthday present, I unplugged that and hooked this up directly to the Jeep. And that worked for about 5 minutes before this part blew, or I heard a loud popping, and you can see that part just popped off. And yeah, so no good, because this is a 12 volt controller. It couldn't handle all the energy coming into it, and so it blew it. So here's what I did next. And first of all, I know that I'm an idiot for doing that. I was really desperate to let my son play with it. And to be honest, I don't understand electronics that well, so this has been a real learning experience for me. But you can tell me if I'm an idiot in the comments. So this is what I did next. I plugged this into a speed controller, a motor speed controller, and I bought the RX30 24 volt controller. And this thing is awesome. Link in the bio. Definitely buy this one because it includes the harness to convert these pins to the pins in this Jeep. But anyway, let me tell you what's wrong here. So I plugged this into this to try to control the speed of the motor because I didn't want it going that fast. Well, I tried doing that and a lot of jittering. More powerful, but definitely this thing was holding it back. So I ended up unplugging that. Even though a lot of YouTubers use that, I don't know why it didn't work in my use case. You can let me know why in the comments. Again, I'm an idiot. So I plugged this directly into there and it worked great for about 5 minutes, but then it kind of stopped. Like he would press on it and it would try to go, but it wasn't going. And I could not find anywhere why that was the case. Eventually I found out that these are actually high-tech batteries, unlike the 5 amp hour, which a lot of people use online. And so long story short, according to ChatGPT, there's like temperature and voltage communication going on between this and the tool on these nicer batteries. I think it's the high output that makes the difference. I'm not exactly sure, but basically it's too high tech for just trying to get a bunch of power coming out of these things. And so I looked at the battery and it was flashing on this 1 bar. So I thought, oh crap, I just killed this battery, even though it's only been 5 minutes. Really, it was just giving me an error warning. And so I'd plug it back into the charger and it would then show 4 bars again. And I was like, what's going on? I could plug it into the tool and it would work. So anyway, that was an error code, not a low battery signal. So what I had to do then was not use that, but instead I bought a very cheap 18 volt lithium ion, M18 Chinese made copycat. So I plugged this into the RX30 24 volt and it mostly worked. I had to do one more step, but this should solve a lot of your issues because none of this stuff worked for me. So if none of it worked for you, or if you just don't want to, spend a lot of money on something that you're not going to use, you could just do this, right? M18, the 5 amp hour or the non-high output, going directly into the 24 volt RX30 controller. But there was one more issue with my setup. So let me show you the inside of my Jeep just so you can see how it works. So I can plug that in. I did end up adding both of the fans because I am scared about it overheating. I've also added a voltage cutoff as well, and that works great. There's the giant RX30, so it doesn't quite fit in there, but I made it fit for the purposes of what we're using it for. So that's what it looks like inside. But the last issue I had was randomly out of here clicking, and the motors would stop spinning, and he would be pressing down, and eventually it would just start up again, but it would randomly stop. And it was not related to this, obviously, because it's it's a not smart battery. And so eventually I figured out that there are some relay fuses over here, and this is what it looks like probably for you. So there are relay fuses, and what they do is they turn off if there's too much power coming, just to prevent burnout of the motors. I think what's happening is these are old, or just too much power is coming, and so these would just switch off and then switch back on when it was okay. So there's one there, and so what I had to do was I unplugged these. So I just unplugged this part, no snipping involved, and I did add a different fuse there, just a higher amperage fuse. So I plugged in one of each side to these two cables, and I just wrapped electrical tape around it just so that there is some sort of preventative measures on each of these motors, because obviously these are still the 12 volt motors. I did not switch out the gearboxes or the motors, so it's still giving it a lot more power than it's used to. And I do hear sometimes some grinding going on in one of the gearboxes at really high speeds. If it's just my son going on a flat surface, you can definitely tell that it's kind of grinding a little bit. But in the grass, and if there's a couple kids in there, then you can't, because it's going slower. Yes, I know I'll probably have to eventually replace those, but this is the setup I got to work. Hopefully one of these tips or tricks were useful, if not all of them. So hopefully you can get your son or daughter's Jeep working just like mine did. The last thing actually I forgot to mention is when my 12 volt controller popped on his birthday, the radio stopped working. So I definitely blew the radio and speakers on this thing. I don't know what you'd have to do to keep that working, so I should probably add that as a disclaimer that I have no idea how to get that working. I did see another YouTuber that had a step down converter just for the radio section, or basically all the electronics except for the motors. So you could probably do that coming out of this controller, just have a step down between this controller here and the rest of the electronics that couldn't take that 24 volts. So if you wanted to keep yours, probably do some research before you hook anything up and blow it like I did. All right, thank you.